Hello and welcome to Coding and Crypto, and welcome to my Rust beginner tutorial. So, I'm assuming if you found your way over to this video, you've probably already heard about Rust, you've probably already seen some of the benefits of using Rust. If you haven't, I'm not going to dive into all those things right now, so I encourage you to go take a look on the web. There's some really awesome articles touting all the features of Rust, so definitely go take a look. And we'll gloss over all of those features as we learn all of the functionality of the language. And so you'll see some of those benefits start to come to the surface as we go. But without further ado, we're going to get right into coding. So the first thing I'm going to recommend you do is whatever IDE you decide to use, this is going to be VS Code, is just go in and get a Rust plugin. This will help with like code completion and with sort of like being able to look up different functions and stuff on the fly. And so that'll be very helpful. The next step is we're going to install Rust. So the easiest way to do this is just search install Cargo. And Cargo is Rust's package manager. So if you guys have ever used like Java, you've probably used Maven or Gradle to support your packages and your builds. That's what Cargo is. It's a package manager which is going to help you keep track of all the dependencies, like different Rust programs or modules that your app is going to need. So the easiest way is just click this first link. It's going to be the rustlang.org. And this is actually Rust's official docs, so feel free to take a look at everything that's in here. Setup instructions are for Linux and Macs, and then down here, you've got Windows machines down here with this rustup init.exe. So go ahead and download that. Now, I've already downloaded a few times, and I have this installed already, so mine's going to be pretty quick, but you should have the same process. Yeah, Defender's not a fan, by the way. But run it. I'm going to select number 1 with the default installation. And when it's finished, you're going to see this. Rust is now installed. Great. Awesome. So now we can get out of here by pressing enter. Close this out. And when you open up a new project, just double check that Cargo's installed by trying to type Cargo. And you can see if the help menu comes back, you got it. So now we've got everything we need to get started programming. So we're going to build a little like example application where we're going to take some user input and we're going to print out some strings and we're going to pretend like we're sending and receiving Bitcoin. It's going to be super fun and we'll learn a lot about Rust in the process. So the first thing you're going to want to do is type cargo new and we're going to call it send Bitcoin. So that'll create a new binary application called send Bitcoin. And you can see it up here. And it generated some files for us. So the first one is going to be cargo toml. Now, unfortunately, I haven't found a good plugin yet to make this look nice. So it's all the same color. But you can see that under the package key, we've got information about our application. So the name, the version, the edition. And there's other keys that you can use to describe your application and put labels on it. And right here, Rust provides a link to that. So you can go and check out how Cargo toml can kind of be expanded. But right here under the dependencies section is what's going to be crucial. So this is where you're going to declare other Rust modules that your program is going to need. So anything that doesn't come default automatically with the standard package of Rust, you're going to have to call in here. So to show you what that looks like, we're going to need this particular module called rand to generate a random number in our example app. So we'll save that. And we can close that out because that's really all you need to focus on right now for cargo toml. And now in main.rs being a Rust file, you can see we've got this main method. Now, the main method is the function that Rust is going to look for when you go to run the application. Okay, so everything gets run out of main. It's your driver function. In fact, in IntelliJ, if you open this up, a little play button will pop up right here. So it'll let you know that. But if you've ever written in Java before, public static void main, right? That's the same concept. And even Python has a main method that you can drive your script with. So pretty neat. Now, this is going to print hello world, obviously. But how do we run this thing? We'll just do cargo run. But before you do that, don't make the mistake. Make sure you CD into the directory that you're working in. So we're going to slide into send Bitcoin. And we're going to do cargo run. And you can see that what's actually happening, so there's our hello world, right? We got the output. But what's actually happening here is cargo run is going to build your app and then run it. So That's the same thing as doing cargo build and then running it. But you can see right here, Rand was installed and it was built and pulled into the application while we were building our app. So you can see Cargo makes that program available to us to use. Awesome. So let's start writing a little example app, get our feet wet with some Rust, and then in future videos, we'll break things down and talk about it at like a granular level. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to set up our like initial core function of what we're going to do. So this is going to be kind of like a command line app, I guess. And I like to keep things organized. So this is how you write functions in Rust, if you couldn't tell from the main one. And if we just put all of our stuff in console and we just tell main to run console, that's how you call another function. So in console, we're going to use print line, and print line's got that exclamation point in there. And we're going to say, let's have fun with Bitcoin. And I like to put these \n to try to create new, or / whatever that is, to try to create new lines and kind of space out some of these outputs. So cool. We know that that's going to just print that out in raw form. What about if we wanted to actually, what do we want to actually do? Well, let's start by asking if they want to send or receive Bitcoin. So do you want to send S or receive R Bitcoin? And I always forget about this, but do not forget the semicolon here. Usually the IDE will catch you, but Rust is very particular about semicolons. In fact, in a future video, we're going to cover the omission of a semicolon. If you purposely leave it out at the end of a function, that's actually how you do a return. Like, you don't have to type the keyword return if you just have no semicolon. So kind of neat. We'll cover that later. But remember to include that most of the time, all the time right now until we cover that. So to start out, we want to take the user's input, whether it's an S or an R, and we want them to dictate what our app's going to do, right? So let's say let command equal string new. So this is how you create a new string. We've got the string struct, and then we're using a method from this struct called new to initialize a new string object. And we'll cover structs later on. So what we're going to want to do now is overwrite this value with the user's input. And they're going to ideally put in an S or an R. Now, in order to overwrite this, right now, this value by default, when you use the let keyword, which is how you define variables, and nothing else in here, by default, this is going to be immutable. So you can't change it. In fact, if I try to go down here and say command equals, let's just do like string from, and this is how you create a string from a small string slice or something like that. Let's just say like Homer. Rust is immediately going to say, hey, you can't do that. Well, actually, it's telling us that it's never being used, but the real error there is that you can't just overwrite this because, see right here, you can't assign twice to an immutable variable. Now, all we have to do to make it mutable is this. Just add that mute command or keyword. You have to explicitly tell Rust that a variable is allowed to be changed. This is part of like the benefits of Rust is you have to be very explicit a lot of times, but it saves you a lot of trouble in the future. It can prevent a lot of bugs by being very explicit about your instructions. So anyway, now that this is mutable, we're going to overwrite it with the user's input. So this is the function to use to do that. It's this IO object here. We're going to use stdin and read line. And we're going to type that and sign, mute, and command. Now, we're going to come back to this in 1 second. Don't worry. So the first error we're seeing with Rust is it's saying this is undeclared crate or module. So in other words, it doesn't really know what this is. Luckily, as part of Rust's internal library that comes default with every program, you get the std library, and you can use stdio. But how do we import this? Well, in a lot of languages, the keyword is import, but in Rust, it's just going to be use. And you can see that error went away right away. So we're going to use this module, this package, and we're going to read user input with it. Now back to this. So what is this thing here? I mean, you can see that stdin is going to create an input, and then we're going to read the line from the user. Makes sense. But what is that? So basically what we're doing here, and this is a little bit more complicated, we're going to cover in a couple videos from now, but we're making a reference here. Now, in this particular case, we are referencing the mutability of this variable command. So essentially, we're checking with Rust right now and saying like, hey, remember earlier when we said that command was going to be mutable? Well, here we are making that change with this function. And Rust is saying, okay, cool, no worries. So that's all that is there. In a video or so from now, we're going to cover references and borrowing, and it's a really important topic, and this will become a lot more clear. But regardless, we're going to just mutate command with the user's input. Sweet. So we said that we want them to enter an S or an R, right? So let's check to make sure that they have actually entered one of those values and handle it if they don't. So here's the first look at a conditional in Rust. And we're going to say if command, and we're going to trim it to get rid of any like new lines or anything that get generated from the user input, equals .eq s. If it does, we're going to do this function send Bitcoin, right? If it does not, if instead command.trim is equal to eq r, then we're going to do receive Bitcoin. I really think I'm going to spell that wrong a lot. Else, if it's neither S or R, then what we're going to do is just this exit console function. So as you can see, we're taking the input from the user and then we're comparing it to either our S or R options. And if it's neither, we're going to do this little exit console. So these are all going to be functions, obviously. And let's go define those. So for starters, we'll do send Bitcoin. And we're going to come back to this one, but I guess we'll just put something up there right now. We're going to do also receive Bitcoin. Put something in there as a placeholder. And then lastly, we're going to do this exit console function here. And this is going to be pretty straightforward. All we're going to do is just print out invalid option must be R, S, or R. And we're going to put those in some parentheses there. All right, cool. So exit console, we just wrote that. Receive Bitcoin. So how do we want this to work? Get this out of the way for a sec. Well, if we want to receive Bitcoin, we pulled that random number generator in here so we'd be able to use it. So let's make use of that and let's just write a function that's going to just send us a random number of Bitcoin. I think that would be pretty nice, right? So anyway, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a print line and we're going to say we're going to receive some Bitcoin. Awesome. Line separators in there. And now we're going to do let amount equal, and here's where we're going to use that random module there. So what we want to do is actually add it to our use statements. And we're going to use rand, and we're going to use the RNG attribute. So just like that. And now that that's being pulled in, we're going to say let amount equal rand thread RNG dot gen range. And that range is going to be from 1 to 10. Nice. Okay, so that's going to give us a random number from 1 through 10. And all we're going to do is just print out this statement that says you just received. And here's how you pipe a value into a string when you're printing. You just do these curly brackets. We're going to finish our string, Bitcoin. And then a comma, amount. Nice. Beautiful. Super cool. And then our last function up here is going to be send Bitcoin, but we're going to come back to that in a sec. So for now, I'm just going to put in like a bogus print line, like hello, something like that. And we're going to take a look at what happens with this function that we just wrote here, this receive Bitcoin one. So let's go down and run cargo run again. And I'll open this up. And if you take a look down below, once this finishes, there's our question. Do you want to send or receive Bitcoin? Let's go ahead, since we didn't do send, let's try to do one that's not in there. Let's do a G. Invalid option. Must be S or R. Sweet. Okay, so let's try it again. Let's receive it. You just received 7 Bitcoin. Woohoo! Wow, 7 Bitcoin. Holy moly. Let's do it again. Send me more. 9 Bitcoin. 4 Bitcoin. So our random number generator is working just fine. That's good. Good to see. Now let's go back up and let's write this send Bitcoin. So again, just like this, we're going to add this print statement here as a header. Instead, we're going to send some Bitcoin. Sweet. Now, let's just have a little fun here and let's come up with like a list of clients, and we'll send Bitcoin to one of the clients, and we're going to make sure that the user only picks someone that's in our client list. So we're going to work with conditionals again, and we're going to get a taste of a collection called a vector. So let's let clients equal vec macro, which is going to turn these entries into a vector. Now, a vector is very, very similar to a list. And for the example today, you can literally think of it as a list for right now. We will cover vectors in more detail later. But for right now, just picture this client's object as a list of strings that represent our clients. And as you can see, they're Simpsons characters. Awesome. So now we're going to print out the question. Who do you want to send Bitcoin to? Get a new line going there. And we're going to just print out each of our clients. So we're going to say for client and clients. And we're going to print. We're not even going to print line. We're just going to do a regular print because we don't need to necessarily skip a line between each of them. And client. And then we'll just print a new line real quick just to have things nice and organized. Now, you can see that and sign has popped up again. So what are we doing with it this time? Earlier, we were referencing the mutability of a function as we or as a variable, as we changed it. But here, we're using it to reference a vector. Now, we're going to dive into this concept in the future in a couple of videos from now. But what this is doing right now is it's referencing the value. So rather than pull in this particular value and all the details about it, like its position in this vector, what vector it lives in, this and that, instead, all we care about is this value because we're just doing something like a print, or like sometimes you might want to like create new variables based on that value. And we'll get into all the logistics of that. But this is what's called borrowing. We're just borrowing that value so we can run this loop and print all the values out. But we don't need the whole vector itself. We just need the values of each of these things. So like I said, we'll get into that more in the future. But all right, so now that we're just printing out our clients list and the user is going to be able to see who's available to send Bitcoin to, we're going to take their input just like we did down here. So you can literally copy paste this. And I'm just going to put this together so it's a little more concise. And it's going to be the exact same function, right? But instead of command, we're going to just change it to recipient. Okay, so it looks exactly the same, right? We're doing IO, SCDN, read line. We're making it mutable. We're using that reference to the mutability to overwrite it. Beautiful. But now we said that we want to be able to check if the user's input matches who's in our clients list. We can't just send Bitcoin to whoever we want in this example. So we're going to write that conditional check here. And we're going to say if clients.contains, and then we're going to say reference that recipient value trimmed. So we're comparing it. We don't necessarily need to pull in that whole recipient string, right? We just need the value. Again, we really only need the value of the string. We don't need the object itself. So if that's what we're going to compare, then let's say, okay, if this becomes true and that entry is inside our clients, we're going to continue with the application. So we're going to do like a print line. We're going to say, how many Bitcoin do you want to send. And then we're going to take the user's input again. Whoops. We're going to take the user's input yet again in the same fashion. And this time we're going to call it amount. Right? So now we're taking the input as the recipient. If they match someone in our clients list, we're going to take the amount from the user. And then we're going to send some Bitcoin. So our final print statement is going to look like this. We're going to skip a line and say, you sent blah Bitcoin to blah. And now we can declare that we want you sent amount Bitcoin to recipient. Sweet. So now this is great. We're double checking that this matches who's in our clients list. But what if it doesn't? Well, that's pretty easy. That's just an else statement. And if it doesn't, we're going to print blank is not in your contacts. And then we're going to go down and type recipient trim again. So it's a nice trimmed representation. And that should do it. So let's just take a quick overview. We already saw the receive Bitcoin function. And I'll space these out a little bit so it's a little easier to see. And we're driving this console function from main. We saw send Bitcoin, we saw exit console, or we saw receive Bitcoin, sorry. Now we're going to look at send Bitcoin. So let's save this. And let's make sure everything's working properly. Scroll up a little, get this a little bit bigger. And cargo run. Let's have fun with Bitcoin. Sweet. All right, so again, if we try to enter something invalid, cool, still works. And then let's receive, because it just feels so great. 6 Bitcoin. Rich. And now we're going to send it. Who do you want to send Bitcoin to? And there's our choices. Let's go with Homer. How many Bitcoin do we want to send to Homer? How about 2, Homer? You sent 2 Bitcoin to Homer. Awesome. Awesome. And now one thing we just want to do is we can do that amount trim. You can see why we've been adding trim everywhere. Oh, whoops, I added to the wrong thing. Because it often will come up like this with broken lines based on the entry. So we'll add trim. We'll try that one more time. We're going to send to Bart 5 Bitcoin. Much better. Now let's do that again and try to send it to someone not in the list, like George. George is not in your contacts. Awesome. So everything's working properly, and that is pretty much how you build a basic program in Rust. And we covered a lot of stuff already. We've really only scratched the surface, but there's some really good nuggets in here. And going forward, we're going to break things down, like I said, in a granular level, and you're going to understand everything you saw in here. And if you want, the code is available on GitHub. There's a link in the description. But I encourage you to follow along in the playlist and learn how to write Rust.